let's move over to the math packet here. We got a couple of questions we want to do, and then we're going to move on. The first one I want to do is in the math packet on page 40, but I want to do question number 5 because I want to do them pretty much in the order we did them. All right. So question number 5, I'm going to let you do this one. So it says, in estimating the market value of a residence by the market data approach, the appraiser verified the $170,000 sale price of a comparable residence and estimated that prices for a similar residence had increased by 2% since the date of sale of the comparable residence. Now, we're only using one residence, right? Our residence, this is a subject property, and one other. So it increased by 2%. After comparing features of the comparable and subject property, she made adjustments for 4 factors as follows. Number 1, location. The subject is better by $1,000. Number 2, site features. The subject is better by $1,500. Number 3, the size of the house. The comparable is better by $2,000. And number 4, condition. Comparable is better by $1,000. The indicated value of the subject residence is which one of these? Now, you have all the information you need, so give it a shot. Give it a shot. So let's look at this. The first thing we need to know, all right, is we have a sales price, all right, a sales price of $170,000. All right, so we have to do something with it. The first thing is that we are going to take a look, and we know that it's a similar residence is increased by 2%. All right, 2%. So 2% of 170,000, we have to add 3,400, right? Which is what? 2% of 170. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, it says here, the adjustments you got to make. The subject is better by $1,000, all right, by 1,000, all right? Yeah, let's see. She made the adjustment for 4 factors. Location. The subject property is better by 1,000. So I have to add 1,000 to my comps, right? I got to make it equal. Subject's 1,000 better. I got to add 1,000 to my comps. All right. The next it says that number 2, site features. The subject is better by 1,500. So what do I got to do? I got to add 1,500 to my comps to make it equal to mine, right? So we're going to do plus 1,500. All right, number 3, the size of the house. The comp is better by 2,000. So what do I have to do? I have to take it down, right? I have to lower it down. So minus 2,000. And then the last one is that the comp is better by $1,000 for condition. I'm going to take that down. All right, I got to match mine. So we're going to make all these adjustments, pluses and minuses. The net's going to be 2,900. So this is going to be 172,900. All right, so the answer is C, 172,900. All right. So if we're better than the comp, we have to bump up the comp. If we're worse than the comp, we have to lower the comp. Let's do an easy one, and then we will get to a little more difficult one. All right, number 1 here. It says an apartment building has a semi-annual net income of $48,000 and has been appraised for $1,250,000. What's the capitalization rate? What is our return on investment? So we have 48,000 times 2, which is 96,000 over our 1,250,000. All right, and that's going to be C, 7.68%. Number 2, last year an apartment building had an effective gross income of $55,575 and expenses of $5,500. If the cap rate is 10%, what's the value? What's the value? Now, this is pretty easy, right? This is not that difficult. So we got to come up with our net income. So it's going to be 55,575 minus our 5,500. So that's going to be 50,075. And then we've got a 10% cap rate. We're going to divide it. It's going to be 500, 750. All right, that's going to be our value. Really all there is to that one. Number 3 should be pretty easy too. So why don't we just knock that one off? So it's really pretty simple in this particular case. All we're doing is what? We have a gross rent multiplier and we have a monthly rent. So 600 times 112. Right? 67,200. So it's D. All right. All right, that's the end of the easy ones. Let's do number 4. I'll let you do number 4. Please read the questions, all right? Don't be afraid to draw these things. Don't be afraid to use scrap paper. It's okay. Nobody's going to punish you for that. As a matter of fact, that's going to help you. All right, 5 apartments rent for $550 a month and 5 others for $600 a month. There's an 8% vacancy rate and monthly expenses of $250. If a buyer wants to yield an 8% return, what should he pay for the property? Five apartments, rent for $550 a month. We're going to multiply everything by 12 down the road. But right now we have what? 5 times 550, and that's going to equal 2750. And then we're going to have 5 apartments at 600, and that's going to give me $3,000 a month. So now we're going to have, if we add those together, it's going to be 5750 times 12 months. And that's going to be $69,000. All right. Now we have 8% vacancy. So 69,000 times 0.08 to find the vacancy rate. All right. That vacancy rate is going to be 5520. We have monthly expenses also. We have monthly expenses here of what? $250 times 12 months. 250 times 12 is 3,000. So now we have income of 69, right? Minus our vacancy rate of 5520. Minus our expenses of 3,000, that's going to give us a net operating income of 60,480. And then we're going to take that and we're going to divide it by our 8% wanton return. 60,480 divided by 0.08. And that's going to be $756,000. So the next chapter that we're going to cover, we're going to talk about landlord tenant. We're going to talk about the landlord tenant. So this is going to be important because you might be a property manager. You may already be a property manager, but you might be one with a license. All right. And you're going to be responsible for other people's money and other people's property. So we need to have an idea of what this takes. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is the definitions. The landlord is the property owner, right? Or the property manager, considered the lessor. They are the lessor. They are giving. Tenant is receiving. They are the lessee. Okay? They're receiving the property. They are the lessee. Now, understand that both the landlord and the tenant have these two privities. Privities means we both have a relationship with something. We both have a responsibility for something. A privity of estates is a mutual or successive relation to the same right and property. I'm the landlord, and let's say Reagan's the tenant. Don't we both have the responsibility of upkeep, right? She's going to live there. She's going to keep it up. I want it kept up because I need to get some rental value out of it, right? So we both have a relationship to keep this property up. And we also have a privity of contracts. Are we not in a landlord-tenant relationship contract? I want her, if she's a good tenant, to stay there as long as she can, right? If she's a good tenant, do I want to get rid of tenants? I want you to stay, right? If you're taking care of the building, you're paying your money, you're doing all those other things, right? A good tenant's hard to find sometimes. So we both have a relationship as far as the contract goes. We want to make sure everybody stays happy. If I raise her rent too far, where's she going to go? She's going to leave. And then I can promise you that an empty building collects no rent, right? I need to keep somebody in there. So we have a relationship, right? Symbiotic, but for these two things. There are 4 types of leasehold estates. And we talked about this back in the beginning of chapter 4, but now we're going to kind of hit it. The first one is called an estate for years. It does not have to be for years. An estate for years, all that means is that it has a specific beginning date and a specific ending date. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, all right? Starts on February 1 and it ends on February 1, 2028, 5 years, all right? On that date, it's over. It doesn't automatically renew, okay? It doesn't automatically renew. It could also be for a week. Starts on February 1, ends on February 8th, 2023. That is still an estate for years. We have an actual start date and an end date. So as long as we have that, it is an estate for years or tenancy for years. Most cases, the most common one we have is called a periodic tenancy. It just renews every year, right? At the end of the year, maybe we have a cost of living increase, maybe we change the rent, whatever. But using Reagan as my tenant, I want her to stay, right? So every year we're just going to have a rollover. You still want to be here? Yes, she still wants to be here. Okay, I'd love to have you. All right. That is, cost of living's up 5% or 3% or whatever it is normally, right? We're going to have a 3% rent increase. Sorry. And she's going to have to say yes or no. And she could leave if she don't want to. All right. So this is most residential leases are periodic tenancy. They automatically renew. The third one we have is called an estate at will. And this estate exists with the consent of the landlord, all right? And I'm going to fix this slide because you're going to pay rent, all right? It says no rent paid, but that's not true. All right, so an example. Let's say I know that my house, the house that Reagan's living in now, my property, the government has already told me that they're going to tear it down and build a road. But they haven't told me when. So I go to Reagan and I say, Reagan, look, they're going to take it down. You're going to have to move sooner or later, but I'm not sure when. Would you like to stay here until I give you some notice for them that they're coming? So we know that it's going to end, but we're just not sure when. And Reagan can say, yes, I'll stay, or no, I'm not staying. All right. So that's a tenancy at will. We know it's going to end. We just aren't sure yet. Maybe Wayne is one of my tenants and he comes to me and he says, Sam, my job's transferring, but I'm not sure when I'm going to be. Will you let me out of my lease? And if I say to him, I'll tell you what, if you would just give me a 30-day notice before you leave, then I'll let you out of a lease. All right. So in that particular case, it becomes a tenant at will. He's going to give me notice and then he's going to break the lease. Right. But it's okay because the landlord has the consent. I said it was all right for both of them. Okay. So estate for years, periodic tenancy, estate at will, tenancy at will. And the last one is called an estate at sufferance. And this is a holdover tenant. This is someone who got on the property legally, signed a contract, but their lease expired on January 15th. It's now January 31st, and they haven't left yet. And they have shown no signs or inkling of leaving. This is a holdover tenant. They're not paying rent, okay? They're not paying rent, they're just staying. So this is a tenancy at sufferance, okay? If I'm the landlord and I go and say, get out, and they hand me the rent, well, once they hand me the rent and I accept it, then I can't throw them out for that month. I have to wait again. I've accepted them if I accepted their money. So the best thing I can do if I want them out is not accept the money. Okay, not accept the money, and then I can have the sheriff come in and try to get them out. All right. No self-evictions. Please do not ever try to do a self-eviction. You will only get yourself hurt. All right. Being dead serious about that. We also have a fixed lease or a gross lease. This is usually a residential lease. And this is normal. Like you're going to pay your $1,000 a month every month. That's a fixed lease, right? It's not going anywhere. You're paying for the gross. You're paying for everything. All right. You're going to pay a fixed amount. In commercial leases, we have some different types. A percentage lease. A lot of not grocery stores, but strip mall stores pay what's called a percentage lease. Maybe they pay a small rental fee each month, but then they pay a percentage of their gross sales. If they make $200,000 for the year, they're going to pay 1 or 2% to the landlord for rent, all right? Plus a small stipend every month. That's a percentage lease. Now, a net lease is what we would call in the business a triple net lease. And this means that you're going to pay the landlord. Let's say I'm a commercial, I have a building, I'm a commercial lease, and I have a pretty big operation. I'm going to pay the landlord a certain amount of money, but I am going to pay the taxes, the insurance, the care and maintenance on my own. Maybe I have people that'll do that, right? Care and maintenance, maybe I have a maintenance guy who can handle all that stuff. Why should I have to pay the landlord to hire somebody? I can do that inside. I have my company's got an accountant. Do I need to pay? We're going to pay the taxes on the building too, right? And the insurance, we'll keep up the insurance, right? So this is called a triple net lease. We're going to pay the landlord some money, but we're going to handle all of the other, we're going to handle all of the details, all of the other details. All right. A graduated lease, just simply tenant pays rent and it increases month over month according to some sort of standard. All right. Now, a ground lease, you see these all the time. You don't even realize that they're ground leases. Do you, something that has a unique building on it? McDonald's, Sonic, fast food places in general, Bojangles. They all build unique buildings, right? If you passed a McDonald's without a sign on it, you would know what? Used to be a McDonald's, right? Do you think that if I was going to build a new McDonald's, I'm going out there and looking for old McDonald's buildings to rebuild them? No, I'm looking for a piece of land. So what happens is I will get a ground lease and I will take a long-term lease. These things are like 99 years or longer. And I'll rent the ground and then build my own building, build a suit, right? At that point, I can build the McDonald's. All right. So the tenant pays rent and builds on the land. So he's paying a small amount for the land and he's building his own building. Now, we also have a couple of different types of leases. A full service lease. If I lease in an office building, sometimes the office building will supply people who will clean the place up. They have their own maintenance crews, things of that nature, wash the windows, vacuum at night after the office closes, empty out the trash. That's a full service lease. They're going to take care of the building. You rent there, we'll take care of the maintenance inside, right? We'll keep it clean. We'll do all of that. That's a full service lease. An index lease says that we're going to adjust your rent versus cost of living. Usually it's a consumer price index, anything else like that. It could be a LIBOR rate. It could be anything, whatever they're judging it on. So if that goes up, that's the percentage your rent's going to go up also. All right, that's the percentage is going to go up. Essential elements of a valid lease. What do you need in there? Now, we talked about contracts not so long ago, a few nights ago, right? Do these things look relatively familiar? This is a contract, right? This is a contract. So we need mutual agreement. We need consideration. We need the parties to be competent, right? Capacity to contract. And we need legal. It has to be legal. It has to have legal objectives, all right? So that is the 4 elements. Same thing as a contract, right? Same thing as a lease. All of these things have to be inside there. That's what makes them valid. All right. That's what makes them valid. So some major provisions in these leases. We can have subleases. We can have assignments. All right. Some of these things we have to take care of. The first thing is we can assign. Now, depending, I'm going to say that we can do these things, but usually they're not allowed in the contract. Usually they're not allowed in the list, in the rental agreement. Okay. For the ability to keep things neat and clean. However, they're not against the law, so you need to know about them. All right. So you may or may not be able to do these things, but let's assume you can. The first thing is an assignment of a lease. All right. And this is going to transfer all of their leasehold interest. You're going to move out. So in this particular case, when we talk about an assignment, let's say my job is, I got a 5-year lease. After 2 years, my job's leaving. And I have to go. So I still have 3 years left on my lease. And what I want to do is I want to assign this to somebody. So let's say Shelby gets wants the condo that I'm leasing. So I'm going to give her my lease, okay, and I will assign it to her. Now she's going to make the payments directly to my landlord. However, if Shelby does not make that payment, the landlord has the right to come to me and say, Sam, she's not paying, you have to pay. Because I am still the first person, right? I'm still the person on the lease. I have assigned it to Shelby. Now, in a sublease, let's use Shelby again, same scenario. Let's say I'm paying $1,000 a month and rents are up to about $1,250 a month now after a couple of years. So now Shelby says, Sam, I'll give you $1,250 a month to sublease. And I say, you know what? That's great. I'll tell you what, let's do that. So Shelby writes me a check for $1,250 a month. And I write the landlord a check for $1,000 a month because my rent doesn't change. And I take the other $250 and do what? I'm going to Bo's, right? We're going to go get some chicken. So in that particular case, it's my money. I just made a few bucks. Now, same problem. Shelby decides that she's going to go see the Crown Heads of Europe for 3 years and not going to live there. Well, guess who's stuck for the $1,000 a month regardless? Me, right? I have to continue to pay, all right? Even if she's not paying, I have to continue to pay. So that's a sublease, and that's the difference. It's just a matter of who's paying who. Shelby in an assignment would pay the landlord directly. In the sublease, she would pay me, and I would pay the landlord. Both times, though, I'm still responsible. All right. So like we said, neither removes total responsibility from the first tenant. I still got to make those payments. All right. I'm going to have secondary liability for paying the rent in an assignment. In a sublet, I'm going to have the primary responsibility. I'm going to be making the checks. All right. And then collecting the money on the side. Now, like I said, a lot of these are prohibited in the lease contract. So make sure you check your lease contract. All right, so how do we get out of them if we get into them? Same way we do with a lot of other things, right? Mutual agreement. Something happens. My job's moving. I can go and say, hey, look, I got to leave. I've got, and the landlord can say, all right, we'll let you out, right? Maybe I lose my security deposit, maybe not, but I got to leave, right? Uncle Sam, I'm in the military. Uncle Sam says, I got a new station, a new duty station. Guess what? I got to leave. Right? Nobody's ever told Uncle Sam they ain't going. Now, tenancy may be terminated by the operation of law if the landlord gets bankrupt, all right? Or there's a condemnation proceeding. In a bankruptcy, the tenant has 90 days to get out, all right? Ordinarily, though, if you buy a rental property and there is a tenant in that property, you cannot just walk in and kick the tenant out. You must abide by the lease in place. Okay, you must abide by the lease in place. Now, we talk about a couple of different exceptions, but there's not many. There's not many, okay? If there's a condemnation proceeding, obviously they're going to knock down the building. Well, there's not going to be any place for them to live. In a bankruptcy, the bank still has to honor it for 90 days. Okay, and then they can ask them to leave. But there are, for most cases, if there's somebody in there as a tenant, you cannot throw the tenant out. You don't have to renew their contract after it expires, but you must honor it until it does. All right. So these may be terminated. All right. If one party fails to perform a material obligation, pay rent. If they don't pay rent, we have the right to try to get them out. Right. We have to try to get them out. As the landlord, the lessor, I have no right to enter the premises during lease terms unless it's granted in the lease. Usually in an emergency, you can get in 24 hours. Something that the tenants requested from like 8 to 8. But if it's something that I need, like an inspection or termites or, we spray for bugs or things of that nature, then it's usually from like 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. We can get in there. All right. And that's what they're covered talking in the black print here. The landlord has the right during reasonable hours and during unreasonable hours for emergencies, right? So we're going to be able to get in there. Now, you will also run into a problem of if you want to show the property and there is a tenant in there, you have to give a 24-hour notice, all right? So even if I have a client here that tonight calls me up, says, Sam, I want to see this apartment, I want to buy the condo, and there's a tenant in there, unless it's after 9:52 tomorrow night, we can't go in there. I have to get notice, 24-hour notice to that tenant. All right. So you will run into that problem at some point. All right. So the Rental Agreement Act, all right, obligations, like we said, landlord and tenant are mutually dependent. I need Reagan to take care of the inside of the property. I'll take care of the outside of the property, right? We want to maximize that. We want to maintain it, right? So I have some duties as the landlord here. I have to maintain habitability, which means that I have to keep it in good condition, all right? It's implied that if I'm going to keep it in good condition, I'm going to do the maintenance. I'm going to make sure the landscaping's done correctly. I'm going to keep eye appeal. If something's broken, I'm going to fix it. All of those things, right? So I have to supply fit and habitable premises. I can't do anything that's going to hurt the tenant. So the property has to meet all the current housing codes, right? Landlord has to remediate dangerous items, right? Unsafe wiring, ceilings, chimneys, roofs. The roof leaks, I got to fix it, right? The refrigerator doesn't work, I got to replace it. All of those things. If you live on the ground floor, you have to have lockable and working windows and doors. All right, it's a safety issue. It's a fire issue. We cannot have a lack of potable water. We need to have water usage in the property. And this last bullet point is how we define heat. Remember we talked about measuring properties and heated square foot? Well, here's where that comes up. We have to be able to heat the house to 65 degrees when it's 20 degrees outside. That is serviceable heat. Now, we don't have to supply air conditioning, right? We don't have to do that, but we must keep that house heated to 65 degrees when it's 20 degrees outside. That's the level of heat that we have to keep in there. So we need to do that. We need to get a working toilet, all right? We have to get that fixed. We also must repair or replace smoke and carbon monoxide detectors within 15 days of written notice. Tenant says to me, Sam, we don't have, our birds are chirping, all right? The batteries are dead. Well, that's going to be up to the tenant to replace those batteries. But if we find that it's not working and they find it's not working, I have 15 days to replace it, okay? Now, important on the bottom of this slide, if the tenant has a complaint against the landlord and they're going to take the landlord to court, can they stop paying rent, all right, if their conditions are not met? Can a tenant ever stop paying rent for any condition? They may not. They may not, right? Absolutely not. So even if they're going to court to try to get out of their lease, they can't stop paying rent. You must do that. So it's a pretty harsh condition. Now, you can go to the magistrate and get these things fixed, right? But you can't stop paying your rent. You still got to pay it. You're under contract to pay it. Now, the landlord has to make an effort to fix these things. They can't just ignore it, right? There's we need that privity. We need to be able to do both of these things. So I can't just ignore it so that we're going to throw them out or whatever. I got to fix them. So I have to, get that done, however way that takes, all right?
If you like this video, feel free to share it with a friend. For more real estate education content, please subscribe to the channel. From all of us at Seacoast Real Estate Academy, thank you for watching.